Hello, dear friends. Today in Allat TV studio, we welcome the esteemed Igor Mikhailovich Danilov,
Hello.
Thea,
Greetings.
and Anna.
Greetings.
The topic of our program today is the value of attention, practical advice, and also subpersonality, influence of third forces. Igor Mikhailovich, several programs have been released, and in these programs, the topics relating to the invisible world were touched upon. Basically, this is what a lot of people encounter, and these are the topics which are not customary to talk about in modern society without a risk of being labeled a crazy person. And it turns out that people not only encounter these manifestations, but they really suffer from a lack of knowledge of what is happening to them, what is happening to their near and dear people. And it turns out that for a very long time, people have been left. They have been one-on-one with these situations, with these manifestations of the invisible world. And the situation began to change only recently, after the primordial knowledge started appearing and these topics started being revealed thanks to you.
Here, I'll disagree a little, because this was mentioned in all religions. The only thing is that it was mentioned allegorically and in the form of fairy tales. Well, and a conclusion was drawn that this existed somewhere, but not in you. Although, if we look, after all, many theologians also mention that precisely in you, and they told about your own consciousness, that all vices and demons are precisely in your consciousness, and a demon acts through consciousness. And the after-death fate was described, though allegorically, but exactly in the form of subpersonality. Basically, all this was there. It's just that, well, it was sort of hidden too deeply. This is what we discussed. Too many grains were
Lost.
not lost, but excluded.
Intentionally.
Well, of course, all this was intentional in order to explain it somehow. After all, it's easier to explain regarding that very heaven that you'll be in the same body, in the same consciousness. Nothing will change for you. You will just live in better conditions. You'll live despite the fact that, no matter what age you died at, you will always be young, strong and healthy there. You won't be sick. Everything will be wonderful and splendid for you. Well, it's more pleasant for demons in the head to hear this.
Right.
And people believe in this. They hope for it. Everything is as usual.
Yes.
However, now, thanks to the knowledge people already know, including the knowledge regarding subpersonality, people actually observe this point, and they come up with practical questions. In particular, there is such a misconception that subpersonalities manifest themselves either only in childhood, or if in adulthood, then only in the form of split personality or schizophrenia, while in actual fact, can a normal person, while an adult who follows the spiritual path, experience manifestation of a subpersonality in everyday life?
Surely, of course, regardless of age or anything else. If there is indeed an active subpersonality which, so to say, substitutes for secondary consciousness, not primary, but secondary consciousness, then the person as personality won't notice that. Nothing actually changes for him. Why does, well, a subpersonality manipulate easily?
So it turns out that an adult won't be able to notice manifestation of a subpersonality in himself, or is there any possibility to notice that?
And what's the difference? Well, I'll tell you even more. What is an adult? Here's a good question. Is it the one who has grown up and got old? The one who graduated, let's say, obtained good education, graduated from secondary school, obtained university education, and even more than one sometimes, right? Like some people. Well, so what? Yet, whom do you feel like inside? After all, personality in the first place is in contact with primary consciousness, and even a very old man has an infant inside him. This should be known. This notion of an infant pertains to personality if it hasn't been developing, while the notion of a child pertains to primary consciousness, whereas primary consciousness has a capability to develop, well, if we look at it this way, well, approximately at the level of a primate. It almost doesn't develop further. That's the truth of life. And here it is easy to trace all this. It turns out that a very old person has both a child and an infant inside him in addition to his education, in addition to, even if he's the most educated person in the world. But when it comes precisely to life, when it comes to otherworldly things, even if he has spent his entire life in theology, in some service, but without practical experience and skills, he still remains a child. And he is still afraid of darkness. Pardon me, if a cat crosses his path, even the most ardent atheist grabs his button, reacts superstitiously. Isn't that so? Well, that's the truth of life.
As for subpersonality, can it be only in the form of a total substitution, or can there be sort of a symbiosis
No.
of coexistence of personality and a subpersonality in this life?
Of course, it can wedge itself in partially. After all, a person doesn't see this. It can influence consciousness indirectly, and the person will never notice this. Yet, there may be total substitution as well. However, if there's a total substitution, personality won't see that anyway. Once we already talked about this, there was a program. Here's a simple example of what subpersonality is, and how personality perceives it. If personality is developed, and spiritually free, well then it's clear that no subpersonalities will get through. But if a person, well, lives an ordinary life, as it is customary to say nowadays, meaning a common ordinary person, for him, this is absolutely invisible and incomprehensible. For example, it's enough, well, to bring a person into a hypnotic state. And what is a hypnotic state? It's exactly substitution at the level of, or I'll put it simply, it is cutting secondary consciousness off. And substitution is made with the image which the hypnotist imposes on him. And that's it. Both primary consciousness and personality perceive themselves as a totally different person already. And personality doesn't see the difference. But later on, when secondary consciousness returns, the person remembers some things and doesn't remember others. And what does he remember? At the level of primary consciousness. Well, again, if the hypnotist gave him a command that you don't remember anything, the person won't remember anything of that. Meaning, he won't even remember that he was a singer, an actor, or something else. While at the time, when he's in that state, for him, it's absolutely normal, in fact. That's why there is nothing supernatural here.
And what should a person do in whom subpersonality manifests itself from time to time, and even, after all, personality wants to develop at the same time as well, then by means of what is it possible?
It's not a hindrance for personality. If a person as personality is really aware of himself, he's not just an observer from the perspective of primary consciousness, but indeed as personality, he actively engages in his development, observation of his consciousness, and keeps his consciousness within the limits, meaning he has assigned. May I compare? Because we will have such a conversation today, as I see, in this direction, and in order for our friends to understand us well. So a person's spiritual life with regard to his consciousness, all these demons and all the rest, must be clearly defined. Last time, we talked about the road which leads to God in the previous program. Let's take the same example for clarity. Well, everyone knows, there are lanes on the road. And so, my friends, imagine that you are walking along an asphalt road, along one lane. Clearly on the left and on the right, there are median strips. These are the red lines which consciousness mustn't cross. Meaning, this is what it must deal with and report to personality. It must give necessary information. It, again, consciousness, must fulfill what personality needs. And this entire three-dimensional life must fit exactly within this lane. However, by no means must it cast doubts on what it mustn't cast doubts on, nor must it subject you to rejection, disputes, and pardon me, theatricality in your head. It mustn't impose those images which you don't need. Why? Because this is the red line, and we already talked about this. And more than once. It's no trouble, my friends. If this will help you, I'll repeat. What's the point? The beginning of work with one's consciousness, in order to understand that consciousness is not your tool, but it's the tool of the system, which manipulates you in the first place, and lives your life instead of you, imposing on you various emotions, desperate states or some desires, well, fairy tales, to put it simply. What else does this consciousness do? It always drives a person into banal disputes, into banal twaddle. It even argues about best friends. Isn't that so?
It is.
It always casts doubts on everyone, beginning with your prophets, if you are believers. It always throws in, was there a prophet at all? Did he really say so? Do I really need to do one thing or another? That is, it stands on the spiritual path in a person's way. And it stands in everyday life, as well as in the family, and in one's daily routine, and at work and everywhere. It always leads a person towards disunion. Well, some people might say, oh no, I don't have that. Of course you have it. It's just that you are lying to yourselves. Yet what is the number one rule?
Honesty towards oneself,
Absolutely.
on a spiritual path,
Absolute honesty.
right?
And here, one needs to approach this reasonably and honestly. There is a clear lane into which everyday life, work, communication with friends, interest and hobbies fit. Whatever you like has fit into here. However, all this mustn't be a hindrance for you on the spiritual path in any way. If consciousness goes beyond the limits and begins to throw in pictures on you, if it bothers you and starts telling you that you are so spiritual, if the demon is telling you that you are spiritual, then it's worth pondering on what he is doing that for. Well, isn't that so? And after all, people do encounter this. When a demon starts exalting and a person begins to believe in that, especially if he's living by consciousness, to believe that he has achieved such spirituality, that he can relax and do nothing. And at the same time, he is sitting and discussing whoever he likes. He judges the saints of his religion. He judges the very prophets. He compares and contrasts himself with them. Isn't it simony, guys, to exalt yourselves to such heights? Become one. And that's when you will ascend. Well, then your demons will be silent, and on the contrary will curse at you. No, at you, but not at anyone else. Well, and surely demons, let's say, always revile at those whom they are afraid of. This is also true. That's why this should be marked with red lines. As soon as you hear in yourself any doubt regarding anything spiritual, this means you should do what? This means a lack of restraint has arisen, and you are given too much food to this system.
To the system.
It means you need to invest more attention in your spiritual development and to demand more from consciousness. It must actively work and help you on the spiritual path, and it must help people. It's also interesting. We talked a lot about this, and as far as I understand, no matter how long we sit here with you and talk, well, not everyone hears this. Why? Because demons cover people's ears, and people want to hear what they want, but not more. The point of the spiritual work on oneself is precisely in keeping one's spiritual ears open. Whereas, before a demon, your ears should be closed, so that it wouldn't tell you fairy tales. So, when a demon starts telling you what you should do on the spiritual path, and what he's telling you is to sit down, to do nothing, to wait, and something will be given to you, because God is merciful. When he immobilizes you, this is what? This is absolutely wrong.
Manifestation, yes.
Why does he immobilize you? Because every person is potentially strong, precisely at spiritual manifestation. However, when any person embarks on the spiritual path, what does the system do?
It gets activated, yes.
Absolutely right. In order to...
Because it's afraid of losing its slave, yes.
It sends all of its forces.
Right. It's afraid of losing its slave.
Whom it controls.
It's also afraid of losing food. That is, no one wants to do a bigger amount of work for a smaller salary. Neither does the system. It is the best economist, since economics is its domain. That's why it does everything, so that a person would do nothing on the spiritual path, so that he would neither work on himself nor help people, would just sit and wait. After all, God is merciful. He'll give you everything, while you already know everything. This is also such a trick. A person has familiarized himself with Holy Scriptures, has accomplished, well, what he's supposed to, and that's it. And he does nothing more. Or for example, he has performed namaz, but from namaz to namaz, he lives an ordinary life, and there is reviling in his head. He's in doubts and all the rest. Is this person on the spiritual path? No. Surely he isn't. The very point is to limit consciousness and to act right, and never to stop feeling God's love inside. If you have stopped and don't hear that God's love inside you, demons are living instead of you during this time. This is also worth thinking about. Well, some people say, this is so difficult. Well, is this really difficult, guys? This isn't difficult. This is easy and pleasant, but it's difficult for demons. Therefore, it's difficult for you only when you are manipulated and controlled. Well, consciousness opposes. No one controls me. Logic. Such kind of common sense from a demon, right?
Игорь Михайлович, Demons, are they any manifestations of consciousness? What are they?
Any. It's consciousness in any version. They say, thoughts from spirit. There are no thoughts from spirit. All thoughts that you hear in your head cannot come from the spiritual world. It's love and perception through feelings that comes from the spiritual world. And the picture is perceived holistically, no matter what it concerns, both a cause and an effect, in everything in the world. But again, you cannot expect that a solution with the right answer to, for instance, a mathematical problem will come to you from the spiritual world. This is precisely the domain of consciousness. There won't come a clue, for example, which numbers to cross out on a lottery ticket, right? To win the prize. No, this is the domain of consciousness.
Should a person sort out in general which activation is now taking place in him, activation of third forces, of subpersonalities, of demons, or...
At initial stages, stages of learning, observation of consciousness, this is necessary. Why? Because the spiritual path is a battle. This is really so. This is the path which a person walks. Well, sort of like a warrior. In the beginning, he indeed opposes consciousness, but in order to oppose skillfully, one has to study the enemy. First of all, consciousness blocks out a person's understanding entirely that there is devil. Since a person doesn't understand that there is devil, he doesn't know that there is God. This is an axiom. And in this case, the person has doubts about everything divine. It seems to him that three-dimensionality just accidentally, amino acids got combined, a primary cell formed, animals originated from this cell. Well, such a sheer Darwinism. However, people don't know that Darwin believed in God and didn't believe in his own theory. Well, this is true. Just business. He devoted his life to that, and he wanted fame in the rest, just like you do. If he hadn't published his yet unfinished work on time, someone else would have done that, as they were already close on his heels. While it was commissioned, it was a necessity. That's why.
Igor Mikhailovich, also regarding these God-fighting motives, it turns out that subpersonality is a God-fighter at its core.
Absolutely.
Do all these God-fighting manifestations represent manifestations of a subpersonality in a person, or is this...
No, not always. No, it's consciousness. No. Most often, it's consciousness. However, subpersonality is precisely a part of consciousness. That's why we are talking merely about sequesters of the whole, you see? Meaning about fragments of a single whole. Well, mere programs.
A woman is also asking such a question. She describes her condition, that she feels tachycardia, a temperature rise, someone is as if supplanting her. Can subpersonality supplant personality in such a way, with such manifestations and reactions, or not?
Well, with such manifestations and reactions, that's a person who is focused on herself. She just needs to see a doctor and check her health. When subpersonality supplants consciousness, a person doesn't notice that, and it doesn't affect his physical condition in any way. It can be noticed from the outside. For example, well, all of you have noticed that, you know this, we have common acquaintances who are clearly manifesting. When you talk to a person about something spiritual, you feel him. He is open, he feels it, then snap.
Abruptly.
An instant, he even winces, he bristles up. There is rejection in him, and precisely a negative third force becomes hostile in him.
And what should a group of people do in such cases when it happens that people are talking openly and suddenly such a manifestation begins in someone?
Well, again, if a communication process is taking place, here we are sitting, talking, or people are just talking. Well, if it happened, it just happened. You can simply ask this person a question. What are you feeling now? Why has it happened to you? And have you noticed it or not? Even to ask that very demon this question. But as a rule, the demon begins to deny. He, on the contrary, says that he has now begun to feel everyone, that he has such extrasensory abilities. He begins to feel at the physical level. Spirituality has come right over him. Well, all this is demonic. Again, when a person begins to feel another at the physical level, I say it again, physically, it's like warmth coming from the hands. Well, have you seen how psychics and various fortune tellers conjure? I don't say that it doesn't exist. It's easy. Anyone can do it, by the way. Well, this is extrasensory perception. While that perception through feelings which we are talking about comes from the inside, and the body has nothing to do with it. It goes beyond the physical structure of a human. However, that perception through feelings gets instantly closed for him right away. Well, and the person changes, and it's just felt who you were talking to. In this case, you can just try to reach the person as personality, just that. And later on, you can explain it to him. Yet, people often even talk and don't remember what they did. Such things also happen. They as if fall out of this time. It also happens when people pray together in various religious organizations or perform a spiritual practice. Let's say, there is a group of positively minded people. Everyone follows the spiritual path. They are working hard on themselves, diligently. Well, as people say, there is a black sheep in every family. Someone has just allowed, not necessarily a subpersonality, but activity of his consciousness. And the whole group immediately feels that someone has bristled up, so to say. This is very much felt, guys. What happens in this case? How does the consciousness of others work? It immediately starts getting active, meaning as soon as someone has manifested in himself. After all, what does a demon manifest itself for? In order to stimulate others.
Such a provocation.
To take people away from spiritual work.
To evaluate, to judge a person.
Absolutely right. The process of judgment, evaluation, how can he do this? We are practicing after all. And why are you doing this now? After all, you are doing the same thing.
Then it starts blaming the person himself, right?
Of course.
That why? How could you think like that about another person and judge him?
This is practice. This is really practice, guys. And everyone faces this. And people faced this several millennia ago. Guys, we'll come to this now. What should be done in such a case? Those who feel each other should simply encapsulate themselves and exclude this person from their perception. After all, it's a demon. Why do you need him? Well, this is the best way. Well, here some will say, and what about helping the person during spiritual practice? Guys, it's everyone for himself. But when there is a group, everyone is for the group. For the group of those who you resonate with. While those with whom you are dissonant, they are instantly excluded. And it also often happens that, for example, people work in groups, whatever religion it may be. It doesn't matter. Well, everyone has faced, still faces, and will, unfortunately, face this. Let's say, people who work with people precisely in a spiritual sense, right? That is, they share their
Experience.
insights, their experience, and so on. And there is always someone in the group as an active conductor at the moment. When it comes to something interesting and important for both the personality and for other people. And so through this little puppet, which it pulls, the system begins, let's say, to stir up or bring all other people into discord with the spiritual world. And everyone keeps silent, and they try to do something. Well, there are such conductors who constantly do that. And they say, well, what should we do? Guys, what should you do? Take him by the ear, get him out, and let him wait outside until he starts working on himself. A minority may not dictate to the majority. A demon may not dictate to people who strive, let's say for spiritual development. He may not hinder them, and may not tell them what to do. That is, you need to grow up. It's already time. They say, well, how can we get a person out of the temple? Okay, let's have covens in temples. Isn't that so? Everyone has gathered for prayer. A mullah starts reading it. And here someone begins to twitch. He comes up with questions. And what does everyone start doing instead of namaz?
Right.
Well, is this normal?
So it's useless to communicate by means of secondary consciousness with secondary consciousness in such a situation when a person is...
It's absolutely useless. A person must work on himself. If he's under the demon's dictatorship, he must leave the temple territory. That's the first rule. Meaning, only people who at least restrain their demon should enter the temple. It's the same at spiritual classes, guys. If a person doesn't restrain his demon, if he doesn't strive for spiritual learning, then pardon me, why is he needed? What has he come for? And the demon drives him there. For what? In order to destabilize you, first and foremost. However, the demon tells him that he's highly spiritual. He knows more, while all the rest are fools. Well, this is the truth. While in actual fact, the person feels an aspiration, again, coming from his egoism, from his pridefulness. He doesn't even understand why. He sees injustice. He starts fighting against it. What kind of injustice? 100 people have gathered. Everyone is on the spiritual wave. They are looking for, so to say, those sources in themselves, which can be consolidated. They are trying to resonate with everyone, while this person alone has a lucid mind. Yet a lucid mind during spiritual practices is what? It's a demon.
The work of consciousness, yes.
Of course. And should this be tolerated? Well, a simple question. And they call it spirituality, tolerance. I understand that one must be very tough and very disciplined towards one's consciousness, and one should be tolerant towards people. One should be tolerant. That's right. And one should be patient. And one should explain. And people should be treated with love. Even the one in whom a demon is strong, that has suppressed his personality. Yes, this little angel evokes pity. Indeed evokes pity. And you really want to help him. This is true. But not during spiritual practices. Not during spiritual classes. For such people, there should be introductory meetings. Again, introductory meetings where a person should understand and realize that he's being manipulated, he's being controlled, that he is weak, that he's, pardon me, a liar, that he's a hypocrite, that he doesn't work on himself. He should be aware of that. But if he's unable to do something, he should come and say, guys, I'm a hypocrite, I'm a liar, I want to, but I fail. The demon is strong, he leads me astray, no matter how so what should I do? Such people get together and they should be worked with separately. However, when there are those who strive, who hold their demons in leash, and there are those friends who live to the dictation of those that are not friends to us at all, well, how can we mix the unmixable? If we take oil and water and try to mix them, we'll get an emulsion. Neither water nor oil. This shouldn't be so, because they prevent people from following the spiritual path, while those ones stir up their demons with their inner purity. Well, and everyone leaves empty-handed, while the system happens to be sated. I understand that feeding birds is a holy deed, but feeding Satan...
Right. Also, Igor Mikhailovich, in continuation of what you've been saying, once you said that basically a person who is developing spiritually, who is following the spiritual path, can be seen by his deeds too.
Surely.
And we would also like to ask you regarding such a point that exactly those people who are egoists, who draw attention to themselves, they neither work on themselves,
and they hinder others.
nor help people, and they want...
And at the same time, they strive to be in groups, meaning
They don't work on themselves either in spiritual communities.
Yes, exactly.
Or in churches, or anywhere. They latch onto religious organizations. What for? In order to earn money and to get power, so that people would kiss their hands and bow down to them. That's all they want. Guys, but this is true. They don't engage in spiritual growth. Well, this is so. They please their megalomania. The demon is strong in them, and so on. However, they won't do anything at the level of spiritual development, but they will do everything in order to satisfy their pridefulness and to develop their egoism even more, so to say.
So it turns out that other people's opinion is important for them. That is...
Definitely. After all, it's very important for them. They themselves are envious, while a demon is who? He is envious. He is a liar. He's an insatiable creature. No matter how much you give him, he'll never be sated. So, here, it's important to understand that such people are idle at the position of the spiritual world. And after all, we know a lot of people who, so to say, used to be near. They didn't even lift their finger. They created a semblance of some activity. But they were always full of doubts. Why? Even talking to them, and I talked to these people. I told them openly, there was an influence on them, and they needed to work better. What did they say? We are working, we are doing. They didn't work on themselves, and they didn't work and didn't live for the society. Yet, what does the first rule say? It refers to spiritual organization. You will know them by their deeds. Isn't this what is said? If there are no deeds in the spiritual field in the outer world, it means there is no work inside either. This is really so. Why? Because while developing spiritually, a person, the one who really feels this song of angels, well, he wants. He cannot help sharing this. He cannot be silent and inactive. When billions of little angels are in Satan's slavery, well, this is so. It's an inner need. And it is felt here, in this world, very strongly. Very strongly. Because here, every little angel resonates. That's the point. And how can you be silent when you feel awakening in yourself? When you feel that your demon has just started giving up and love is flaring up in you. And you feel this love in others. You feel an aspiration in other people to get liberated. However, consciousness is very strong in them. It has enslaved them. If it is possible to get through, you get through. Well, if a little angel's personality has given up, if he hasn't developed, it's a pity, of course. It's like a fetus that hasn't developed. It's a pity to lose him, but you can do nothing. That's his choice.
But it turns out that as long as a person is here, no matter how strong a demon is, personality still has a chance, right?
Of course, it does. But here, the first thing that they should, it's personality, to stop lying and living by fairy tales, but to really look inside yourself, not with Satan's eyes. He will exalt and praise you, but to look objectively, just as you are. And everything falls into place, who you are, where you are. It's not important what position you occupy, what you have achieved in this three-dimensionality. All this is dead, and that's the truth. You may be a king, may be a ruler, but you'll be the most miserable person if angels don't sing inside you. You can have a lot of children and build many houses, but you'll be lonely. Isn't it so? And people know all this. All people know that. Well, here in our world, it is considered to the dictation of demons that you must become someone, must control and manipulate someone. Well, we have discussed who controls and whom. As soon as you have a desire to possess someone, to control someone, then who are you? A simple question. Are you really a spiritual being? No. Are you living? No. You need to look down attentively. Whether there is a hand of someone who controls you, or upwards, are there strings?
You've just mentioned the hierarchy of demons, right? It turns out that demons are also in a constant fight for their peace.
They are.
How does it generally affect
The life of a human.
the life of a human, meaning his or her consciousness?
The life of society or the life of a human?
The life of an individual, this fight of demons, dark forces.
And it's also sort of interesting about society. After all, it goes fractally.
Well, and we see everything anyway. After all, we do see all that. For example, in a person's life, how this takes place, the fight of demons. And let's not go far. Say, in the previous program, you and I touched exactly upon kids, how this happens among them, meaning among teenagers. Let's take, well, everyone studied at schools. There are schools in all countries. How does this happen in a class? Banally, everyone attracts attention to themselves with everything possible. Someone tries to do that with their intellect, someone, pardon me, with a hairdo. Others try, well, to paint their nails. Girls, even if this is not permitted at school.
Right, while someone does it by provocations, yes?
Certainly, whereas boys begin to show how cool they are or how stupid they are. That they, say, stand on their heads in the middle of a classroom or something else. This is exactly the attraction of what? Of attention.
Attention.
The fight is going on for what? For attention.
For attention.
Now, let's take a more adult life. And isn't it so? What do they fight for? For attention. Let me give another very interesting example. Friends, relatives, or close people have gathered. Well, many have such situations. There's some holiday, a birthday party. Respectable, serious people come, right? They sit down at the table and drink a shot each. That's it. A demon has come out. 50 grams of alcohol are enough for personality to lose any influence on the demon. That is, the demon begins to rule, absolutely.
It is secondary consciousness.
What do we see happening to people? Firstly, they start boasting, don't they? Everyone begins to draw attention to themselves, and there starts like, I have such a, oh, big deal. While I have, right? Even if they say, I have such a pain. Oh, your pain is nothing. While I have real pain. Someone says, check my car out. Is that even a car? Check out mine. And this competition begins.
Tug of war, yes. Whoever pulls over more.
A fight for what? For attention, and thrusting out of one's ego. And this takes place everywhere and always, and at all levels where there is a demon. This is true.
So it turns out at these moments when such situations happen, not a person is leaving, but a demon instead of him.
Definitely, of course.
And being entirely in some kind of their own life, these demons are competing with each other. Which one can draw more attention?
Exactly. Personality isn't an illusion. It is blind. It doesn't develop. It doesn't live. The person doesn't develop. After all, what is the life of personality? In the first place, it is the growth of personality. That's why I say it's time to grow up. How many times have I said that already? Well, to grow up means to develop as personality, to develop spiritually. If personality doesn't develop, if it's not nourished, and it really needs to be nourished with attention, that very attention which personality allocates is actually its tool. It is simply being stolen by consciousness for illusions. And that very personality is being told that everything is fine. You live, you exist. The world is such as it is. It's material. There's nothing else.
And you can do nothing. That very consciousness tries to persuade personality that the latter is weak and inactive.
Sunshine. I'll say even more. The prevailing majority, well, actually, 99% and even more of people in the world don't know that they are personalities. Billions of people today believe that they are consciousness. Isn't this misfortune?
It is.
I believe it's a misfortune, and a great one.
You've also noted correctly, yes, that it turns out that when there is a lack of this knowledge, such a situation occurs that a person just believes these thoughts in his head, that some invisible world, some secret forces, dark forces, are stronger than he is.
They don't believe in that. The thing is that people don't believe in secret forces. They don't believe that there are subpersonalities or that there is actually... Consciousness doesn't perceive that.
While at the same time, it's afraid, it experiences fear.
It's afraid because it knows that this does exist.
And that it's exactly a part of that, as it turns out.
Meaning here,
Such dissonance.
of course, and there's an interesting phenomenon here, such a trick, let's say, with that very demon in one's head. He reports to personality, well, rather to primary consciousness, that there are no witches, no demons and the like. However, he immediately frightens and says that those do exist, and so a dissonance arises in the person himself. He both believes and disbelieves in that, but at the same time, he constantly encounters that and finds evidence. After all, any person encounters manifestation of that very demonism, manifestation of these dark forces. Well, in various devilry many times in his life, constantly at that. Many people go to see psychics. Psychics actually don't believe in that, because among psychics, well, it's safe to say too, 99% just make money on people to Satan's dictation.
Charlatans, yes.
Well, yes. There are talented people who are really developing to the dictation of that very system. They develop extrasensory abilities, and indeed, they can both save people from diseases and see diseases inside a person. However, if there is a pill, if there is ultrasonic testing, MRI and all the rest, then those are more accurate and more correct. I'll put it simply, no psychic will ever say accurately which organ, where and what exactly is wrong with it. Meaning he won't describe it, he can say, yes, that organ there, and approximately, well, I'll put it simply. Let's take not even anyone, like a specialty physician, a general practitioner who has worked for 30 to 40 years as the best psychic. He can tell plenty of things by simply looking at a person. Well, isn't it so? Yet people believe, for they want fairy tales. And again, they want fairy tales. They want magic. But on the other hand, they disbelieve. And thirdly, they are afraid of all this. Thus paradoxes arise, which take place within a person himself. But why? Because he lives to the demon's dictation. The demon, the devil, is hiding inside a person himself, and forces the person to disbelieve that the devil exists. Why? Because he's actually the one who tells this to the person, and it's sort of extremely difficult to find him. Well, where can you find your consciousness? A simple question.
Igor Mikhailovich, you've just mentioned psychics too, and I also recall that earlier you've talked a little about cases when non-spiritual people appear in a group and say, I feel. These sensations of subtle energies, are they related in any way? Because people often associate them with some spiritual development, with some advancement.
Guys, this has nothing to do with the spiritual. And in most cases, this, on the contrary, stands in the way of the spiritual. That's the problem. While it's extremely easy to learn this, let's say, well, ordinary meditative practices which enable a person to develop these abilities, well, it's not difficult. Any person possesses this, and indeed, A human being is able to feel heat fluctuations up to 1/1,000,000th of a degree with his or her hands. Our neurons, fingers on our hands, are extremely sensitive, and there's nothing special about that. Meaning, running his hands carefully at certain distances, any person can feel this, yet what does it have to do with spiritual practices?
Nothing.
A trait skill, well, and all the rest.
When developing spiritually, does a person necessarily begin to feel manifestations of the invisible world?
No, not necessarily. Such things also happen. There can be development of really, let's say metaphysical abilities, which don't fit into any limits of psychics. And this also happens when a human thought gains such an ability that it gets implemented instantly. Such things do happen. Well, most often these are tools palmed off exactly by Satan in order to lead a person astray. And we know plenty of such people
Yes.
who were standing next to us. However, manifestations of these super abilities, as it is said, have simply led these people astray from the spiritual path because, again, they get magic abilities. They gain an opportunity to influence someone, and here the system leads them astray. Well, and then follows, as we know, alcohol and drug addiction, and au revoir.
After all, it turns out that the paradox is that even these abilities and everything, they're actually gained not by him, not by the person, not by personality,
Certainly
by
not.
his demon, as it turns out.
Not really. It's just the demon that manifests them, and that's all.
So it turns out,
Well, it's easier for the demon to violate certain principles of his, to manifest. It is much easier for the system, let's say, to demonstrate certain manifestations of such kind, sort of to give an opportunity to show to a person. After all, it's not even he who desires to do that. It's the demon playing before him. It is such a theatrical performance. While the person believes in that, he forgets about his spiritual path. He invests attention in the development of these abilities. In the beginning, it is actually telling him what? You'll fight against demons, you'll become a Galliard, look what abilities you have. Well, and the person begins to develop.
Start developing them already now.
Everything is as usual. He starts developing them and that's it.
Igor Mikhailovich, and if these abilities, not abilities, but rather such manifestations, begin not on the spiritual path, but much earlier, in teenage years, between 12 and 16 years old.
This happens, sure. They do happen.
There happen such situations when kids, as you have correctly said, see some scenes which immediately get implemented in some tiniest details, and they get frightened by that, just close themselves off and are afraid of even thinking in any way, because they feel responsibility for their thoughts. What is this? What should a teenager know?
This also happens. Well, it's good if a person, so to say, feels responsibility, especially a teenager, and he tries not to invest attention in some images that for him, again, who provides him with these images? Who implements that? And what does he take in return? After all, he takes away what's most valuable, life. And sometimes he, this demon, takes the future away from the person too. However, if the person feels that this is dangerous and stops, let's say, feeding the demon, he does absolutely the right thing as a mature personality. This is wonderful.
That is, at this age, the system sort of hooks a person with magic, right?
Well, a child. The thing is that he's like modeling clay, and a lot depends on his choice here. After all, a person becomes interesting, particularly interesting to the system after the primary surge. We've already talked about that. And exactly at the threshold of the secondary surge, or after the secondary surge, he's especially interesting to the system, meaning that is why in many religions that vary Zoroastrianism.
Right.
We've also talked about this. By the time of the secondary surge, a person must decide whom he serves, whether he serves God or Satan. And that's what is wonderful about ancient religions, because they have still preserved that essence, which was later on forgotten in other religions.
It's also interesting, we've touched upon the topic, of children. It appears, and it's quite interesting, that psychotherapists and psychiatrists have found that when they were doing research and preparing for the program on the topic of subpersonality, they understood that there were gaps in their knowledge. In particular, the topic regarding invisible friends of kids, when a child communicates with some, as adults believe, imaginary friend. He calls him by name, invites to sit next to him, or says, "Granny, you can easily leave me with this Uncle Joe." Meaning, what kind of phenomenon is this? Is this a manifestation of subpersonalities or not?
Well, let's put it this way. Some psychiatrists say that it is sort of a split. They attribute it to a disease or to children's fantasies. Well, frankly speaking, this has nothing to do with subpersonalities. Definitely not. However, the invisible world is like an ocean. I talked about this many times. A lot of very intelligent creatures live there, and sometimes they are much more intelligent than people. Yet, all of them want to eat. And among these invisible friends of kids, there are good ones and there are bad ones. At times, invisible friends are much better than the visible ones. And sometimes, it's much better to leave a child with this Uncle Joe, as you say. Well, it's just necessary to investigate what it is and who he is. This will be much safer than to leave a child with an actually living Uncle Jack, who's an alcoholic. The thing is that in most cases, kids really see these creatures, and they communicate with them freely. And they really do exist for kids. But not all of them. Far from all of them are evil. Yet, again, you should understand that all of them are in contact with your kids just because they want to eat. They are interesting.
Meaning, this is the reason why they come, for attention, right?
Well, certainly attention, yes. Attention is energy, it's like electricity. Well, some consciousness of some people has started boiling up, and it is boiling up exactly because this is true.
Yet, why at such an early age, meaning kids are open, or what do they want from them, from kids?
Well, secondary consciousness is not that developed. After all, a demon that is getting born is weak, just like personality, and it develops. They should develop simultaneously, while generally speaking, it would be right for personality to develop, whereas consciousness should develop secondarily. Well, what have we got? We develop consciousness and don't develop personality in our kids at all, because we ourselves are like that, so there turns out to be such an imbalance, so to say. However, a human demon gets born. It doesn't come. Yet, when a subpersonality comes, pardon me, it's a mature creature that comes, sometimes a very old and a very experienced one. Well, there's certainly competition here, let's say, between a young consciousness and an old, experienced subpersonality. So, these invisible ones naturally become visible because there is personality's activity, meaning it's not that closed off. They say a child is closer to God. Why? Because the devil is not that strong. That's the point. And so when Jesus told his disciples, be like children, meaning be open, feel. Children do feel. They have this perception through feelings. However, if it is not developed, a person won't have it, of course. Therefore, one should still be closer to God.
Also, continuing the topic of subpersonalities, during that very preparation for the games of psychiatrists and professionals, they have also touched upon such a subject that a subpersonality of a man's deceased daughter visited him and predicted the future in his dream. Yet how is it possible that a subpersonality can predict the future?
Easily. For a person who's locked in three-dimensionality, well, this is possible. There are surely techniques. There's an opportunity to develop such abilities in oneself, and it's possible to see the future, as they say. However, for this, one should go beyond even, pardon me, the fourth dimension, not to mention the third one. Whereas subpersonality is, excuse me, far from being in the third dimension. That's why for it, the future, the one which the system itself programs, well, the system, as we know, is an absolutely written scenario. People say, destiny, and you cannot escape your destiny. If you live by the laws of the system, you won't escape, because that which you, if you are destined to stumble, you will stumble. The system wants it this way. That's when a subpersonality can easily come and predict things, because for it, these are open maps, so to say. It's not a problem for it at all. And by these maps, it can see where you are moving and how.
Because it itself is a part of the system which exactly programs this future with algorithms, right?
Absolutely. Of course. However, the thing is that as long as a person resides here, in three-dimensionality, his consciousness also poorly, it clearly has a contact. It's a part of the system. It knows much more than it shows. But the subject is closed. The subject of the future and everything else is closed. And personality, until it is developed, doesn't even understand that there is such a concept as death, that there is after-death fate, and so on. However, when a person, let's say, gets spiritually liberated from the beast dictatorship, then he understands everything. Everything is revealed to him, just as it is revealed after the death of the physical body. Basically, after the death of the physical body, well, if personality was developed, it also realizes everything, but insufficiently.
But not on time.
Right, but it's too late, so to say. Well, this is revealed, but unfortunately, it's revealed only afterwards. Although, it's possible to learn this during one's lifetime as well. What's the problem?
Well, it turns out that if a person follows the spiritual path and gets liberated from the ties of consciousness and the beast,
He becomes free.
then he no longer fits into this future of the system. The system can no longer...
He doesn't fit in there. Of course. Let me give a simple example. It will be understandable because in the modern world, there are lots of various games on these diverse electronic, well, game devices and the like. And so in games, everything is programmed. No matter which way, in which direction you go, everything is programmed. If you enter a place where it's not programmed, you bump into a wall. In your life, if you go somewhere where it's not programmed, you'll be turned around. Just like in a game. In a game, you can see the edge of the game. In your life, you won't see it. The system will simply turn you around. However, all steps are programmed. Yet when a person escapes, let's say, from under the system's dictation, it cannot predict him. Meaning, he moves as he wants and goes where he wants. So the system won't be able to predict. Once we've already mentioned that there were such famous foretellers as Casey, for instance.
Casey, yes.
Yes, Vanga,
Nostradamus.
right? They predicted a lot of things, but many of those haven't come true. Why? After all, it comes true for a person. For example, we go year by year, it comes true. And then suddenly, no, it's a miss. And then again, why? Because the one whom a predictor talked about has taken a different step, or someone
in his environment has taken a step beyond the system scenario.
in his environment has taken a step, sure, again, a free step, and the scenario has got ruined, though the main line has been followed. Well, that's why I say that very Casey predicted a big calamity for the world, didn't he? Yet everything depends on people. If they take a step, everything will be different. That very Vanga predicted not very good life for people. Well, if they take a step, it will be different. Everything depends on people.
But she also predicted the advent of the fiery Bible.
She predicted that, yes. Well, for sure, the system knows when it will get it in the neck.
And also, in continuation of this topic,
It doesn't like that either.
you have talked about games and the fact that in games it is programmed where a character is going. And there was exactly such an experiment with photons where there was, well, a roughly similar theory concerning this world too, that for as long as there is attention of a human, this does exist. But as soon as the attention disappears, it ceases to exist. Well, is this world really sort of built in such a way that if you take attention away from something, it no longer exists?
Of course. And what for? After all, what takes place here? I'll say even more. A demon is alive for as long as a human is alive, meaning humanity. The system exists for as long as soul-filled beings exist. Once there are no soul-filled beings anymore, there will be no system. It is pointless. What is it needed for?
That is, it lives solely due to our attention?
Absolutely.
And that's all? It has no other resource?
But what for?
Meaning, it draws in detail the reality at which an observer's gaze is directed, right? That is, from a wave into a particle.
I'll put it simply. What are all these gadgets powered with?
Electricity.
Energy.
Energy.
Absolutely right. Attention is what?
Energy.
What does it originate from? From personality.
From personality.
What does personality get it from?
From the soul.
What does the soul get it from?
From the spiritual world.
The spiritual world is pure Allat.
Yes, it's the source of life.
That's the answer for you. Meaning the system, the devil can exist exactly for as long as personalities exist, meaning souls.
It's also interesting. We have also slightly touched upon the topic of the end days. People wonder, is it correct that at the end of the crossroads time, a borderline between the third and the sixth dimension gets erased and people can see these creatures there?
They can. For an instant. When it will be erased. You won't have time to rejoice, guys. Because this borderline gets erased at the moment of death of the physical body. It gets erased in the same way. And people begin to see. What is the first thing they realize in the beginning? That there is no body. There just isn't. The second thing is what? That they are of a certain size, but not the habitual one. Thirdly, that they are helpless and desperate. And then they begin to realize and understand the world structure which is concealed now, That's when they understand that there is devil and there is God and everything else in the world. How many various concealed miracles were there during a person's life, and how diverse life is. And they understand what the power of human attention is, and what God's love is. They understand everything, but it's too late. And that very subpersonality, again, at the expense of what does it live? It's actually like a parasite on a soul, isn't it? And there can be many of them. They are like fleas on a dog. Due to what does a flea live on a dog? Due to the dog's blood. Meaning, again, due to those same emanations, due to that very Allat, the presence of that personality, which was part of the soul. But there has remained only such an...
Information program, yes.
Well, it becomes, yes, such an
Игорь Михайлович,
undeveloped chick that hasn't hatched out of an egg.
there is also a question from people, and so, generally speaking, well, how to sort of fight against a subpersonality? Does a person have to overcome only his consciousness or subpersonality as well, or...
Well, wait a minute. And why fight a subpersonality? After all, again, whether to fight against a subpersonality or not, for example, we've approached this. You've asked the question, if a person feels activity of a subpersonality, if, pardon me, it is stupid and bad, well, you just turn it off. If, well, let me put it simply, okay? If a person spiritually develops to such an extent that he controls his consciousness, and his consciousness really lives within this lane, as we have started discussing at the beginning of our program, on the road, and he doesn't allow it to cross the red lines, then he absolutely doesn't care whether there are subpersonalities, third forces, 10th forces, even 20th ones. He controls absolutely everything. And he is free. He is living. However, if this person has, or used to have an active, so to say, subpersonality which is stupid, incites him to alcoholism, or sows doubts, which inside him blasphemes God and everything divine. After all, it's often a subpersonality that provokes this rejection of everything spiritual, gives rise to doubts, and simply makes people wince.
It gets activated in response to that.
Right. It either forces a person to fall to his knees, or, again, to fall to his knees, but not to accept the internal, not to work on himself. Inaction in the external. Well, certainly you simply shut such subpersonality out. Well, again, it was an undeveloped human who didn't work on himself, and that's it. You don't feed it. It has come for attention. If you don't give attention, it disappears. But if, excuse me, you are lucky, and some very smart professor, for instance, is that very subpersonality, you should just hold on to him. For he's a fount of knowledge. He's a library in your pocket. While he merely needs attention. You set limits for consciousness, for the subpersonality, and all the rest. Then your subpersonality is, so to say, active when you wish. It's an assistant. And that's when such a symbiosis occurs. You see? Meaning, you give attention. It lives. It doesn't experience pain and suffering. And the one who once lived, but he is very smart, he knows life. He really gives you useful advice. He gives you hints. Yet how does this happen? A person doesn't notice that. Say if we take an ordinary person, he won't understand that. If a person is spiritually developed, he certainly understands where his consciousness is, and where there is an activation.
Someone else's experience.
Well, of course, if such a fount of information comes, well, where have you such a smart one appeared from? If you didn't learn that, but you know it, this is such a luck. Well, again, I understand that if school children are watching us now, they will get envious all over. They would say, I wish I had such a math teacher as subpersonality.
Additional terabytes.
Maths is also good. Math is maths. A lot of things are based on it. Even physics is not physics without mathematics.
I've just recalled that once you shared that it's like additional terabytes of memory, right?
Of course. Well, surely. It's an extension of the capabilities of your computer on which you work. This is marvelous. You just, again, shouldn't allow it to go beyond the limits. And you need to keep that very, pardon me, maths professor, no matter who he is, within the same limits as you keep consciousness. That is, there should be your rules, not theirs. Well, unfortunately, people live by these rules.
The question is who controls whom in this case, right?
They live in a rigid hierarchy. After all, both consciousness and subpersonality are in a very rigid hierarchy. That's why consciousness always strives to be a boss or something else. Well, and it immediately deems its boss as a fool. You see? That is, it knows more. Well, this is an everlasting, because the world of dark forces is a world of hierarchy. In this world, pardon me, has imposed itself on our world. And so, we have the world of hierarchy here. We have only bosses and subordinates, and two friends who try to dominate each other. Isn't it so? It is. Whereas in a spiritual community, that should be eliminated. Excuse me, if these hierarchies already result in idiocy in religions, that there is a supreme ruler in religions, well guys, this is sheer totalitarianism.
So is this the reason why people have certain servility before those people who have a superior rank or some higher position?
Well, surely, of course, certainly. If he occupies some position, if he holds a high position, he's already a heavenly being. Well, what kind of a heavenly being is he? Change that exactly to the opposite, guys. Then it will be correct.
Here's another interesting thing. In the invisible world, are the only creatures that do harm to a person, or perhaps there are those who help him?
No. Why? Well, again, why go far? Let's take intermediary ones. Skyfish, the invisible world.
In no way. They are neither good nor bad, right? Meaning basically they don't.
Do they do
don't
harm?
do harm.
No.
Neutral.
But we conducted so many experiments, didn't we? Even here at the Coordination Center and the like. When people were performing spiritual practice and an enormous number of skyfish appeared, or experiments with that very pyramid. Again, why? Investment of attention, manifestation of energy, meaning food. It's like strewing millet for pigeons. And they swoop down, same as with these ones. There appears something to eat, and they come to eat, and when they discover, well, if one keeps feeding them at the same time, there becomes more and more and more of them. And we did see swarms of them here. Well, again, look what a hierarchy they have, right?
Yes.
When they were where the pyramid was, little skyfish appeared first.
And then
that was
plasmoids
recorded.
as well, right?
Then plasmoids came, and skyfish had to leave. Hence what? Plasmoids are superior, you see? Well, this is such a semi-visible hierarchy. You can no longer argue. These are already facts.
And if we also speak of people ask questions about guardian angels, meaning like peculiar creatures that help a person, yet what is actually a guardian angel?
A guardian angel is conscience and freedom of personality. A person's guardian angel is exactly personality. It is its freedom. This is exactly what the guardian angel is. It is conscience. It's what is coming from within. However, people perceive this differently. Again, let's take a simple example. A person goes and commits a crime willfully. For instance, he commits a financial crime, and he feels that an inspection is to come. And he makes changes in the numbers. They come with an inspection. The numbers are right, and they leave. He says, "My guardian angel has helped me." Guys, well, isn't it so? Yet what guardian angel has helped him at this time? Either, pardon me, a subpersonality bookkeeper who was smarter, or it is, again, from Satan. What kind of a guardian angel can it be? Has he come from the spiritual world to protect this fellow or what? Well, isn't that so? Well, it is imposed so in everyday life.
Igor Mikhailovich, and what about such a notion as a stronger or weaker guardian angel of a person? Does that exist? Is that actually the case?
Yes, it is. If considered in such a context as I've just said, then the stronger a demon is, the stronger your guardian angel is, you see? And if he's very strong, then those who have come won't even take a bribe. They will bow at your feet and leave. And if you are very, very strong, they will even kiss your hand. Doesn't that happen?
And in the primordial meaning?
And in the primordial meaning, devilish affairs are devilish affairs. I'll just put it simply. When a person gets liberated and really becomes a free angel, and he comes to the spiritual world, he comes there as an equal among equals. Isn't that so? Isn't that what the prophets told you about, while you were still measuring who among you is taller? You should listen to the prophets, and you shouldn't forget, and you shouldn't alter.
You've also mentioned earlier that a countless number of angels rejoice at one little angel that has come.
Certainly.
And why do a countless number of angels
Just because.
rejoice at just one little angel?
Well, why? Because this is a joy. How can you not rejoice at the one who has survived, the one who is alive, who has gained life? Well, this is really joyful. Let's put it simply, a good positive family, because there may be different families, and far from everyone is happy when children are born. Well, let's take what is stereotypically imposed on our consciousness, okay? There's a good family. They are expecting a child, and the child is born. Is it joyful?
They do expect.
It should be joyful. At least, right? While there, it is really joyful, because one really is born. This is his choice. This is his path. He comes on his own. A child is born not because he wants to, but because his parents were negligent, or they wanted this. That's how children are born here, in this world. While in that world, the one who has come, he has overcome Satan. An equal one has come. A victor has come. Well, this is surely joyful. And how can it be otherwise? A worthy one has come.
There's also a question that, after all, personality is compared to an angel. There's also this movement of wings. And what is the movement of personality as a spirit? What is it manifested in?
In development, in freedom. After all, the stronger a personality becomes, the weaker the devil is before it. Well, not the devil, the imp. We don't actually take the devil as a whole.
And why are such associations often drawn that wings are spreading?
To fly up, to spread out. Those who perform spiritual practices or who really engage in deep prayer practices, irrespective of religion, what do they feel? They feel manifestation of freedom when they enter a prayerful state. Isn't this similar to the spreading of wings? Or in spiritual practices, isn't that so? Well, this is really so, because you sort of throw off these filthy scales in this body together with these imps. Hence the association appeared that an angel is free. Well, and what did people do, in the past? They said that an angel is, pardon me, something like a swan, that is winged and flies. Well, there was such an association, and later on, it said in this way, an angel means someone like skyfish, half visible, having wings and flying. And where did they leave this angel? Here in three-dimensionality.
Well, in fact, this is the real you inside.
Well, in fact, this is you.
Yes.
Yes.
And do children communicate with angels and guardian angels? And how does this work?
Well, again, I'll put it simply. Both children and adults can communicate,
But not by means of pictures.
there is a little point here. If you are an angel, you'll communicate with angels. If you are a demon, you'll communicate with demons. Well, isn't that so? How else can it be? Excuse me, everything is strict here. Similar with similar. If consciousness prevails in you, if you live only by consciousness, then you communicate with consciousness of other people. You won't be able to communicate, and you'll never know that there is an angel. And how else? But if you have attained spiritual development, if you have overcome this imp inside, and you've become free, then you can communicate easily with free beings like you.
Igor Mikhailovich, I'd like to recall a point regarding communication through feelings as well. The girls have just been sharing about the filming of the previous program, what they felt and what happened afterwards. It would be nice if they share it as well.
Right, such a spiritual gift was given to everyone in the end. And when we were in the studio, we were doing it together with everyone as well. And we noticed an interesting moment that while rewatching the program, we felt that exact moment even deeper. And we were a bit surprised, thinking, but like we were actually present there. Yet while rewatching it, we felt it even deeper. And we would like to ask, what is this?
A resonance with oneself. This is a resonance with oneself, first and foremost. Well, that moment from the previous program when there was unity of people, well, naturally, it was strong in itself because there were lots of people at the same time, and it's growing bigger and bigger. But the greatest resonance a person has is with himself. Here, I can explain if our friends are interested. It's easy to do.
Yes, it's very interesting.
It doesn't take much, just a camera, a digital one preferably. While performing a spiritual practice, well, again, guys, it's for those who can do it.
Specifically a spiritual practice.
A spiritual one, a deep spiritual practice, or a person in some religion is able to attain really deep prayerful states when there is a mutual connection through feelings with the spiritual world. While doing a prayer practice or a spiritual practice, you record this entire process on a camera. Then, you turn it on so that you can see it on the screen and feel, and continue performing the practice together. You feel this resonance, and your practice becomes more intense. And if you do it, let's suppose, every day, approximately at the same time. The same time is important because there are deviations. If you do it at a different time, you will feel differently. If you do it at the same time, the position of the moon, of the sun, there are plenty of factors. We won't go deep into physics, but this is true. Especially the sun, it has a very strong influence. Doing it at exactly the same time, you will feel this resonance increasing. What is the paradox in this? If you've done it 12 times, and during the 12th time, you do tunneling backwards to the primary, then you will feel an overall opening up. It's a very intense thing. Well, of course, here again, many will ask a question, what is tunneling? These are special practices. They are not needed for the development of the spiritual experience. They are as necessary as that very chetverik described in Allat, for instance. It would be useful for any person, but it's a specific tool. It's necessary for those who need to sense the ones you cannot see with your eyes. Let's say, with ordinary human earthly eyes. So is it necessary for spiritual development or not? For spiritual development, it is not. Let's put it so. But to understand your own structure, to understand that a human is not only what we sense and see, but a bit much more even here. Well, it would be useful, but it's not fundamental.
So it is sort of a working tool of professionals, right?
Yes, just a good professional tool. One of the basic ones. That's why it was given. Well, first of all, it was given to those who understand, so that they could understand who had given it and what for. And secondly, as a supplementary tool, even for people who are just stepping on the spiritual path. Well, as a tool for self-protection, let's say, kind of self-defense, speaking our language, because with good practice, with truly proper skills, it allows not only to keep it within limits, within one lane, but also to make sure that the system won't even think of stirring, meaning to limit the abilities of the demon that must work for you instead of you working for him.
So it turns out that in Chetverik, the front essence is a part of the material world too.
Absolutely. It's a part of the material world, yes, but it is more neutral and it has to do more with personality, let's say, not with those ones, and it is definitely a material entity, just like the structure is and the body. Well, I'll put it simply, does your back or belly have anything to do with the spiritual world? It doesn't. On the one hand, it sort of does, but it doesn't. This is matter which, excuse me, will disintegrate.
I've also recalled, you've just mentioned, you've even also been talking about the experience of how a person can do the spiritual practice himself and then watch it and feel it 12 times. And here's this number, 12 times. I've just recalled the moment when, in the service program, you also said that ideally it would be good to watch the program at least 12 times.
That's not what I said.
5, but 12 is better.
I said, and not 12 as it should be done.
What happens? Why such a number?
It's a cycle.
A cycle.
A lot is tied to this. There are certain laws, but then again, if you watched it the way it should be done, for example, you just take a rhythm, and the rhythm also plays a role. How is that? If you watch every other day, it's 12 times. If you watch every day, it's 12 times. If you watch every day 5 times, then you miss one day, and you have broken the rhythm, meaning there are already changes being made. And here, mathematics plays a huge role. That's why I say, still, it wouldn't hurt to have a maths professor as a subpersonality in symbiosis.
People also ask a question regarding the following. Does God see a human when the spirit manifests itself or not?
Well, then again, if we consider the concept of a human with a capital H as a liberated personality, then he surely sees.
And the person who's walking the spiritual path?
No, he doesn't. God cannot see him at the moment of spiritual practices. But still, there's a phenomenon here. When a person really starts feeling God's love, he makes this contact. He feels this love. And when he sends it to the spiritual world, he gets a response. And that's where it comes from. What you have given to God will return 100-fold, you see? More. Why? Because this love comes back. Sorry, But at the initial stages, there are personality and soul. The interaction is here, but not with the spiritual world. The second stage is interaction through your soul with the spiritual world. But there is no you yet. And when the fusion takes place, when a person indeed becomes an angel, when he spreads his wings, as you said, then he is surely seen. That's when he is accepted, even despite the fact that he can still be here in his body. He already becomes a part of the spiritual world.
It appears that in the Allat book, exactly the practice dialogue with God is described. Well, that very moment, how it happens, meaning it turns out this starts with the person himself, until he himself makes contact first.
But of course, if a human being doesn't knock, no one will open for him. Although the door to the spiritual world is always open. A human being should come. Who is a human being? We've already talked about this. We'll put it simply, it's a hope for a possible angel and an obvious devil. Well, like this.
Right.
If we express it in a civilized manner, the devil is obvious, while the hope for a possible angel is just a hope. So how can God see this? Do you understand? It's the same as, imagine, let's take a married couple who want a baby. They haven't done anything yet. They just have a wish. Do they see it or not? That's the answer. Well, they already have the intentions, so a human being is just an intention.
But as soon as he himself starts taking these free steps in this direction,
Yes, but if for the birth of those who are here, of the chosen ones, as they say, right? Those who are chosen to take the first step, all people here have been chosen because they are here. They surpassed a great number of their competitors. However, they should become the truly chosen ones, those who will get liberated, but it depends on them. Our parents are responsible for the fact that all people appeared here. Well, some appeared thanks to doctors, but still it was our parents' will. Isn't that so? Whereas the next step is a conscious step. It's our struggle, our human struggle. These are our steps. If we don't take them, if we don't resist Satan, sorry, nothing will work out. Well, it just won't. You'll remain where you were. Just don't regret it later.
continuing this topic, there is another question about spiritual beings who come here into the three-dimensional world, about prophets in various cultures and religions. And such opinion exists that if a prophet comes into this world, he's supposed to know everything, to know what you've had for breakfast, what thoughts are in your head right now, to know.
It is Satan who imposes this, and that's exactly the way he judges. Like, if a prophet has come, he must be a perfect creature who knows everything.
Right, everything about the material world in particular.
Certainly. Well, guys, I'm going to reveal a big, great secret to you. It's going to be a shock for many. We won't go far. Let's take Jesus Christ as God's Son for Christians. Let's take Prophet Muhammad, the most beloved by Allah.
Yes.
So neither of them knew the multiplication table. They didn't even know the Mendeleev table. Well, this is true. How's that? They are prophets. They must have known everything, and they didn't know the color of your socks. Why? Because they didn't care about all this, and they didn't read your thoughts. They didn't need to do that. However, they knew who they were talking to. An angel or a demon. They knew the structure of this world, and they knew that it's enough for a person to accept at least 2 grains, which are in every religion, and to grow them. Like in a fairy tale about beans. Remember the magic beans? To grow them and to climb up to heaven.
To heaven.
That's what they knew, and that's what they tell you about. But ideally, 27 grains would be better. Why? An entire field, it's easier to walk. Well, if a person doesn't accept even 2 grains, no matter how many you give, he won't accept anyway. A demon brushes everything off. That's the point. So, those who come know much more than it seems to you, but much less about this 3-dimensional world than your imps would like. While the system knows everything about this 3-dimensional world, But your consciousness knows nothing about the spiritual world. And that's why it acts so aggressively. Why does consciousness of any person push away like this? Why does it lead him into doubts? When a person steps on the spiritual path, why does it expose him to lots of trials and temptations just in order to lead him astray? And a weak one falls off, natural selection. A strong angel will fly up, whereas a weak one just won't, like a weak bird before a long flight. But it's not a bird's fault that it is weak. Whereas a human angel, the one who a human actually is, it depends only on him, whether he will fly or not. It depends on his choice, on his position, whom to be, a demon or an angel. That's the point. And this shouldn't be mixed.
Igor Mikhailovich, in one of the previous programs, it was said that a person should allocate 20% of time to the material and 80% to the spiritual. And some people did not get this point, and they asked, what about work? What about family?
Okay. And you've just said, allocate 20% of time to
The material.
80% of time. I've never said this.
Of attention.
That's why many have such an opinion.
I've said it wrong. I get it.
After all, I said, a person should pay 20% of attention to the material life, meaning to that very demon with all his concerns, which is within a strictly limited lane of our life's road, while 80% should exactly go to the spiritual development of this very angel of ours. That's when it would be right. But it's not time.
And how does it happen in practice, for example, when a person goes to work, when he spends time with his family?
The first thing that must be understood is that one shouldn't lose this angel song inside, this God's love. And this 80% goes to the contact with the spiritual world. 80% of attention is given there, while 20% is more than enough for communication with your children, your parents, your loved ones, your friends, work, and all the rest. I'll give you a simple example, and it will be clear for everyone. How much time does this demon distract you with theaters in your head, talking to the ones you are not talking to, God fighting, especially those who have just stepped on the spiritual path, this sowing of doubts, evaluating your egoism, your useless desires? Does it really take less than 80% of time during the day? Time, I emphasize, instead of doing work at your workplace, instead of communicating with your family and loved ones, instead of enjoying the beauty of nature and all the rest, pursuing your development, learning something?
Yes, indeed. After all, it turns out that even when a person is at work, does he really think about work all this time while he's at work?
Of course not.
Because this attention flows out totally.
Most of his time, he is thinking over either envies someone, or, let's say, compares himself to someone, or judges someone, or talks to his invisible friends. Yet, kids often talk to real friends, whereas these people talk to a fantasy in their heads. That is, demons argue with one another, while you as a viewer observe these actors from the auditorium. We had such a program. We once talked about this. Everything is simple, in fact. Consciousness mustn't palm off on you what you don't need either. Judgment about your friends or anything else. Why judge anyone? Isn't this what Prophet said? Don't judge. Don't envy.
It turns out at the moment when this theater is taking place in one's head, the person doesn't live as personality.
He surely doesn't.
And what is the life of personality manifested in? Meaning when it turns out their lives?
In a spiritual contact, it's the world of feelings. It's not the world of consciousness. And consciousness will never perceive that. It's a deep perception through feelings. And the more, let's say, mature this angel is becoming, the more this world is expanding into the spiritual world. This interconnection with this world is expanding. Eventually, horizons get erased until he becomes a single whole. This is not the world habitual to consciousness. Well, many will have a question. How is that? And what is that? Guys, when you achieve it, you'll understand. Wow, everything begins with simple things. What is the first thing to do? To eliminate all sorts of doubts. Some say, well, doubts. Not about us, not about me. No, I have nothing to do with this. You can have doubts about me. You can disbelieve me and not listen. But believe your prophets completely and don't have doubts about them. Don't doubt that truth which they brought to you. And yet don't confuse things, for the devil always misleads. He confuses your spiritual advisors. Pardon me, your priest, your pastors, your imams with your prophets. And you start listening to the same demons as you, who have doubts, who just come to work, who go to work and think, these fanatics will mess with my head again. Well, isn't that so? You should treat them with caution. If they are good people, treat them as good people. Whereas if they are demons, treat them as demons. The point is not about them. The point is about the prophets, about the truth. That's whom you should trust. And you mustn't ever permit this demon to have doubts. And all the more, to revile at what is sacred. That's when it's right. And you should learn to love the spiritual world, to love God, not to fear, but to love. The next step is to serve. While service is manifested in what? In being active.
In multiplying love.
In multiplying love and in helping other angels.
People, yes.
Absolutely right. In opposing slyness in all of its manifestations.
You've also mentioned in the program that it is precisely important for a person to pay attention to personality's development.
By all means.
How does it work, paying attention?
But I've just said, personality develops exactly this way. Personality develops in contact with the spiritual world, whereas consciousness develops in contact with teachers, in communication with friends, and in skills. Everyday commonplace skills in three-dimensionality, the inevitably dead ones, but they are also needed for the survival of the body, for communication, because if a child doesn't learn to speak, he won't be able to talk to other kids, right? He won't develop.
There was also a series of questions during spiritual practice. What does a person come in contact with the seventh dimension, or is this already an exit beyond the 72nd dimension? What might be the answer for such people?
I wouldn't give any answer to such people, because this question comes from the demon. The question is not from personality. After all, it's consciousness which is interested. What is there in the 7th dimension? And what is there in the 72nd dimension, right?
How to move through dimensions after the 7th one, yes.
And how to move through dimensions. In no way, guys. Generally speaking, this doesn't concern you. Those need it, again, for whom the Chetveric practice is described in Allatra. As I've said, for them, dimensions are important, something else. While for those who follow the spiritual path, who strive for God, but are not going to oppose the system, specifically in service, so to say, those need to learn to love. To love, first of all, one another, to love their prophets, and surely to love God, the spiritual world. This is important. And not to listen when demons begin to tell you about some dimensions, to send you, they will make things up. After all, consciousness can draw a picture for a person that he has already left, even the 72nd dimension. Do you think it's a problem for it? These are three-dimensional images. They say, how to distinguish? Quite easily. The system will never be able to show you what perception through feelings is. And it will never be able to imitate real God's love. Never. But instead, it can draw anything for you. Jesus Christ will come to you, and the Virgin Mary will talk to you easily. After all, it's the master of illusions. Yet, what did saints say even in antiquity? Whoever would come, and whoever he would introduce himself as, since he comes in an image, send him away, because it is Satan. Isn't that so? Whether in a dream or during your practices. Everything that appears as an image comes from consciousness.
There is a question from different people with similar situations that a person is aware of himself while being asleep. He understands that his body is sleeping and feels himself separate from the body, and he's aware of that. At that, he hears a sort of strange, very loud noise, and he also has unpleasant sensations. He tries to plunge into the lotus, but this doesn't help either. What is the mistake here, and what should one do in such cases?
You mean he tries to wake up and he cannot, right?
Yes.
He is trying to somehow use a spiritual practice, even when in sleep, and he is unable to. What is his mistake? His mistake is that this person is playing, pardon me, what demons have imposed on him. This is the activity of secondary consciousness, while primary consciousness hasn't awakened completely. But connection between secondary consciousness and personality has already been restored, whereas primary consciousness, pardon me, must stand between personality and secondary consciousness. And here such an imposition occurs, a dream within a dream, when you cannot wake up. What should you do? You should get up and go, and not play this listening to what is making a noise there. What is there? Especially not do any prayers or practices. Well, this is, it's like the system has imposed, and a person sort of gets into a fairy tale, and various things happen to him, and he doesn't know how to get out of there, where to run, and so on. These are such labyrinths, entanglements, and he understands that it's a dream. However, how to exit, how to disentangle. You shouldn't disentangle in any way. You should hold your consciousness within the limits. You must be the master. And it's not Satan who should be the master. Whereas the system, meaning your consciousness, is exactly that Satan who I'm talking about. All this is an illusion from him. When a person wakes up, realizing that he is still in a dream, but he's already aware of himself as personality and as a connection with consciousness, he should get up and go, and not fool around. And also, when you have got up, if your health allows it, do about 20 push-ups and learn a couple of Chinese expressions, so that consciousness wouldn't engage in nonsense. You should keep it within the limits. Towards yourself, you should treat yourself in a very disciplined and very strict way. That's when everything will be fine. Take a couple of Chinese phrases, and until it learns them, don't even feed it. Believe me, it will stop.
So there is no manifestation of third forces in this. That is simply...
There are no third forces here. Well, this is banal. This is normal. After all, the process of a person's falling asleep and waking up, that habitual process which we use, is nothing but disconnection. Meaning, at this time, personality is resting. Resting from primary and secondary consciousness. But also disconnection between secondary and primary consciousness occurs. This is normal. That's how it should be. Otherwise, if a person is without sleep, well, his body gets sick, and generally speaking, there has to be a break, there has to be rest. And during sleep, exactly, primary consciousness is working with the body. A little bit, restoring and helping it. Natural processes are taking place there. Well, and like rebooting of a computer is happening. Everything being put in its place. Malfunctions are being removed. Sleep is a very important element, too. Well, and again, personality is not under attack. However, when awakening is taken place, the first thing that happens is connection between primary consciousness and personality, and later on, secondary consciousness gets connected. But when primary consciousness is still busy, well, when it hasn't totally repaired the body yet, especially if a person works very hard, gets too tired, or doesn't sleep enough, well, and here it turns out that he is sort of half asleep. He's drowsy. Connection seems to be restored. Secondary consciousness gets activated while the primary one is not in control yet. And in this case, there begin various cartoons and getting into such states like Alice through the looking glass. Well, one shouldn't do anything. Get up and go. Everything disappears immediately.
Also,
one shouldn't play these games and shouldn't invest attention there. Everything can be controlled and sleep can be controlled. Everything is subject to control because all this is mischievousness of secondary consciousness.
There is also a comment from a man. It would be interesting to know whether it's exactly the same manifestation or is it already a different sleep-related story. For more than 7 years already, invisible forces come to me. Let's say I'm laying in my bed, half asleep, and suddenly fear attacks me. My body is shivering. I want to get up, but I can't. Some force is attacking me. I want to wake up, but I can't. And if I open my eyes, I see as if a black stripe is in the room. I don't want this to repeat. I cannot use my voice, only Bismillah prayers.
No, not always. And very often, it's exactly a manifestation of third forces. Well, in this case, it can also be invisible creatures that are really able to attack. Once we talked about them, incubi and all sorts of such. After all, their point is when... Yet here again, the person is half asleep, meaning when secondary consciousness is weakened and disconnection begins. That's the time when they can attack. Why? Because when secondary consciousness is active, it's sort of difficult for them to enter. Well, quite strong ones still enter. As a rule, this is the moment of falling asleep. Such an easy drowsiness. As soon as the activity of secondary consciousness towards primary consciousness has weakened, the influence on personality decreases. Then certain, so to say, creatures can wedge themselves in. Their goal is to frighten. It's primary consciousness that experiences fear, in this case. Personality allocates a lot of attention because an unclear situation arises, but they just come to eat. To put it simply, they just need to eat. As it is said, what should you do? You should stop being afraid. Well, you aren't afraid of a shadow, are you? It's the same in this case. These physical sensations, sees a person, yes, it does happen. Sometimes kids even see hands, it also happens. And they say that somebody covers them with a blanket. A child is lying in bed, and suddenly, he really gets covered with his blanket. He sees these, well, as a rule, always black silhouettes and black hands. Why dark and why black? And why is it always black creatures that come? Because they absorb light. During their materialization, they absorb. If we see and record skyfish, we see them white. They have a property of drawing in
And such white and gray ones.
droplets of water,
Water.
which reflect light.
Reflect.
Whereas those ones don't draw water in. They are like emptiness, and they, on the contrary, more absorb light. They don't reflect it. Due to that, there is such a materialization of certain creatures of such kind. Well, their goal is just to scare. If you got scared, you are feeding them. If you haven't got scared, you won't feed them at all. Well, they are just there, and that's it.
So it turns out to stop being afraid, it means to redirect one's attention somewhere, right?
Absolutely right. To anything you like. Redirect attention even to the big toe of your right foot. I'm not even talking about anything, meaning something elementary, autogenic training, and everything disappears immediately.
So do they actually exist owing to attention?
Of course, they come for what? For attention, to eat,
It turns out that the whole...
to charge their batteries. But if you don't feed them, they disappear. If you do that once or twice, that's all. It's pointless. Because they spend a lot of energy to become visible, you see? That is, especially, imagine, in order to affect physically, and pardon me, there might be really intense manifestations when they even harm the body and leave bruises on it. Can you imagine how much they need to materialize in order to squeeze? But when is this manifested? Does this happen during the first manifestations? No. As a rule, it must visit a person a certain number of times. And here, we can observe certain laws. All these manifestations, when they start physically, leaving bruises or something else, they won't kill, but will really scare. They leave marks after 12 visits. Again, what do we see? The initial cycle.
A case exactly like this took place, right? With invisible friends. Manifestations were described too, when an invisible woman used to come to a child and then told him not to tell about her to his parents, otherwise she would strangle him, and such marks were left on the child.
Yes, this is it.
What can a parent do in this case, for example, if such a thing happens in a family?
Just explain to the child that he needs to invest his attention not into contact with the bad ones. And if they're bad, he shouldn't give them attention. They won't gain strength and won't do anything bad. Because if it's not good, you know, the more you give, the more it wants. It will demand, demand, and demand. Why? Because they are insatiable. Well, if such a creature is aggressive, it will go as far as to strangle, bite, and scare. Well, it will do anything. Everything that you are afraid of. That's what it will do.
Such a follow-up question concerning what Anna has said about kids and parents, that these invisible friends ask the child not to talk about their existence. What kind of secrets can there actually be between these invisible friends and children?
Any kind. Well, one needs to understand that again. If these are intelligent creatures, and they are like a part of the system, then, naturally, they can maintain contact and communicate with the child. And sometimes, they are much smarter than a human being, and they will talk to a child on the topics that he's interested in, meaning whatever is really interesting for a child and what he pays his attention to. Therefore, and why not tell the parents? So as not to give rise to doubts, not to scare, meaning so that the child doesn't get distracted. That's why they develop such a secret.
Meaning, as soon as he tells his parent about it, there is a risk that it will disappear, that it doesn't exist.
What is the first thing parents begin with? That it doesn't exist. The child begins to doubt. They begin to distract him, and that one starts vanishing, while he can actually manifest himself. Just imagine. After all, the very process of materialization, even of such a creature for, let's say, the child's frequency range requires enormous energy expenditures in order for the child to see him. If that creature doesn't get the energy back, this is extremely unprofitable. And what if he doesn't get it back a couple of times? Well, this is totally unprofitable. Therefore, the more the child invests attention in him, the more interesting it is for the child to communicate with this, well, let's say, woman.
Invisible friend.
Or some uncle. What did you call him? Uncle Joe, right? The better it is for this Uncle Joe, the stronger he becomes and the more he is interested. And he will teach and tell him absolutely anything. Yet, again, they are divided into good and bad ones, but they don't have good or bad. Let's say all of them are of that kind who want to eat.
Attention.
Yet, don't we really, I'll go back again, don't we really drain attention of each other? And let's note how much. Let's note how much attention we consume, and we require attention from one another. Isn't that so, my friends? After all, this is the same. Why do we strive to attract other people's attention to ourselves? And who strives to attract attention in us? Well, everything is just the same way.
What you have told regarding sexual topics, the fact that these creatures come at the age of the primary surge.
Well, surely, of course. After all, it's interesting for them. What is a sexual surge in a child? It's primary Allat in the purest form that takes place, right? There goes an impetus, especially in girls, not so much in boys. In boys, this is also significant. A boy is also, let's say, a tasty morsel for the system, and the girls are even more so. Certainly, they appear as a rule about the time of the primary surge. Hence, this is natural.
And also regarding materialization of these invisible friends, it happens that a child, for example, is riding on a swing and says, "Don't sit down here on the swing, my friend Masha is riding here." However, other people actually don't see her. So does it mean they materialize themselves only in the child's reality?
Absolutely right. Of course. And why would they, well, to materialize for the visible for everyone? This is, well, pardon me.
Very costly.
Disputes and doubts.
Yes, this is, well, firstly, not everyone can do that. It's so energy consuming that it's hard to imagine. While for a child, this is easy. It's just his amplitude frequency.
To match up with the frequency of perception, right? And that's it.
Yes, of his secondary consciousness, and that's it. After all, it contacts not the child himself, but his consciousness. That's why it is visible to the child. All this is very simple. These are field structures. While in order to do harm or to move something, by the way, there was an experiment, right? Again, I go back, this was really conducted. They gathered kids who had these invisible friends. And they were in one room, about 10 kids. They placed a lot of small toys in front of the kids and let them communicate. It was all recorded on various video cameras. They saw only their own friends, but didn't see friends of the others. And the most interesting thing is that when the kids were asked to play an active game with these small items were moving. Who was moving them? This certainly may be attributed to telekinesis or something else, right?
Among kids.
Well, meaning those creatures were playing along and helping them.
So this generally indicates how the system, consciousness, can draw anything for a person within his system of perception.
And doesn't it actually draw?
This happens exactly this way, that when children see invisible friends in the same way, people see actors in their heads who are doing something.
I'll say even more, and I'll tell you even more, Sunshine. After all, consciousness as a single system has drawn for all of us, the inhabitants of this planet, that we are enemies to one another, and we fight and compete with each other. and so on. Isn't that so? It has drawn for us that we have kings whom we must obey while we are slaves, or vice versa, that we are kings while some people are our slaves. It has drawn that some people are better and others are worse. After all, these are the tools of consciousness. And we all live under this dictatorship. It forces us to envy, and it forces us to act so that someone would envy us. Why? A fight for attention. Yet, why does a person need attention? A simple question.
When he has personality, possesses this resource himself.
Demons are fighting out of habit. This is a transfer of the laws of the invisible world to the visible world by this system, and it simply creates it in its image and likeness, just like they have. The same is here. But who does this? Do they do this? No, it's us who do this. After all, neither the devil nor these imps in the head have either hands or feet. They have neither a tongue nor eyes. All this is ours. We do it all, but under their guidance.
The key point is that this desire to take and to consume attention exists in a human being just like in the demonic world. As soon as he...
The same is here, for sure, and insatiability. Yes, we can satiate ourselves with food because we cannot fit in more, so to say. But we'll never get enough fame or other people's attention. We'll never get enough power, meaning that which is immutable, or enough funds, enough money. No matter how much is given, it's never enough for a human. He says that much will be enough for me. It won't be enough.
Just a state of the devil inside or of the demon, it's insatiability, right? Meaning it is carried over to all spheres of a person's life.
Absolutely right. This is absolute insatiability, of course.
Well, it turns out that as soon as personality tames consciousness, then a totally different stage already begins.
Absolutely
And
right. A person becomes free from these mindsets. He begins to live.
And what can help personality tame consciousness?
What do you mean? What? Discipline, first and foremost.
Many people just want to hear something special for their consciousness so that to subdue it and to give freedom to personality right away.
Right away. It doesn't happen like this.
Well, people write, tell my consciousness something like, right?
In order to subdue it, right?
It doesn't happen this way, my friends. In order to gain life, one needs to work. One needs to really practice, to stop being lazy, to stop lying to oneself, to start acting, again, to start practicing, not to engage in listening to the devil and dancing to his tune, but to actually start practicing and studying consciousness. What is the first thing everything begins with? Yes, it's clear, with being honest with oneself,
Honesty.
but also skills, ordinary skills. It means taking a closer look at your thoughts, the ones which you don't order, just to observe from the standpoint of an observer, even from the standpoint of primary consciousness. How many thoughts and what chaos is in your head, and who dictates to you, and who forces you to do what? To learn simply to remove doubts regarding everything that concerns the spiritual world. Where is it coming from? In such negativity, in such quantity. Why is it doing that? Just to ask yourself a question, to make your consciousness answer the questions. Well, isn't that so? If it gets you outraged and anger boils up in a person, well, towards a friend or something else, envy, well, these negative, why do you need this? And why do you allow this? Why does it give this to you? And when you realize that it's consciousness giving this to you, and this is not yours, it's already a part of the victory. Well, then there is more, and to develop this way. And that's when life is actually gained. Well, without effort, nothing can be achieved, and life cannot be earned all the more. While, if you sit and wait, nothing will happen due to the fact that you sat in meditation for a while, or performed a couple of prayers, or went and lit a candle. This is a lie, and deception from the very system. You are highly spiritual. You've already gained everything.
You've also mentioned that even at the first stage, a person should observe and write down that which is manifested in his consciousness.
Of course.
After all, this will also help to reveal...
Why does one need to write things down? Well, again, how does consciousness parry? It says, what? I should walk around and write down all the thoughts? But when will I live? When will I work? You see, it's again a trick from consciousness. After all, what's the point? When you observe your consciousness, you see that it's not your thought that is coming in, and you write it down. You haven't ordered it. You are engaged in, for example, well, you are cooking borscht. And suddenly a thought comes, what a scoundrel my neighbor is. Write it down. At such and such time, neighbor is a scoundrel. You are making borscht or cooking something else, well, just trivially. You are engaged in something where your attention should be focused. For example, in studying a foreign language, attention should be focused on this. However, it begins to judge someone, or you recall some conversation with someone and get into an argument. Why? Many will say, consciousness is arranged this way. No, it's not so. This is the way it manipulates you. And at this time, you forget who you are and why you are in this world at all. The more so, when a person begins to think about spirituality, starts feeling at least something inside, well, here, demon begins to rage even more. It begins to distract. It starts doing everything possible in order for a person to go off the path. Why? I'll give a simple example. A person wants to eat, and here is food, right? And mice are running towards this food. What will you do? You will protect your food. So consciousness protects the same way. And mice in this case are you, and the food is also you.
I also remember how you once shared that when a person works on himself, keeps a diary, makes these records, it's even easy for him to determine when some new ones enter, some manifestations, meaning he will easily notice them.
Definitely. Well, of course, everything is new, everything is manifested, but apart from that, one also needs to learn to feel all this.
The most important.
Of course, that is love. Sincere love, love for the spiritual world, has to be developed. It all should go in parallel. It's real work. It's not just to sit somewhere in meditation on some mountain and to dream that Zeus will strike you with lightning and you will get enlightened. Well, he really can strike you with lightning, but you are unlikely to get enlightened.
In the program Consciousness and Personality, a topic of magic was addressed, and at this point in time, already having practical experience of observation, participants asked that. For example, when they plan a discussion with someone or a meeting with somebody, it happens that consciousness starts telling them persistently sort of, it's magic, it's magic. How will you be planning now? Where will you go? You will now engage in magic. And here such a question arises.
Well, again, assistance from consciousness, right?
Yes, exactly.
And as I understand, the question is what is magic and what is not magic? I'll explain. This is easy. We have basically mentioned this before, but if there's a question, there will be an answer. If you are preparing for something, for a meeting, you should have questions arising. You need to determine what is profitable for you and what is not, what you accept and what you don't. This is preparation. This is normal. After all, you prepare for exams as well. But if when going to a meeting, you are keeping it in your head, you allow an image to appear in your head, an image of the person whom you'll talk to, and you are already talking. That's magic. You are already trying to create a certain illusion, and you inevitably lose. Everything's very simple. It's the same as, while going to an exam, you have learnt one examination topic, the 17th topic, for instance, and you are going and thinking all the way how you will get exactly the 17th topic. Well, you will get a topic, but not the 17th one, because deals with the devil always end up badly. Nothing more than that. Why spend so much time on magic if it's easier to learn all the topics? Isn't it so? First of all, you will know more, and secondly, you'll have less risk.
Indeed, it's too costly for personality.
Certainly, of course. And magic is actually, well, they say, does it exist or not? It surely exists. It exists, and it is manifested. And it is manifested every day, because all people engage in it. Practically everyone, and everyone pays these bills.
And if a person, for instance, is going to negotiate with somebody or is going to a meeting, and this very attitude inside, let's suppose, can this happen that a person already has a predisposition to think, as you've said, that other people are enemies and that he will be now saying something to them and he won't be accepted?
He will be proving something, but he won't be accepted.
Yes, and
any construct is exactly magic, precisely to these questions.
As if they are created in advance.
Certainly, he creates a precedent in time and space.
He does it himself.
Of course, yeah. When you know that you need to go somewhere and solve some issue, you just stand up and go. And you don't let consciousness play with what might happen there. You will get there and see, what's the difference? Well, if they don't accept you, just turn around and leave. And if they accept, that's good. So you need to act according to a situation. Then your every step won't be planned and predetermined like in a game. Everything is simple.
I like the words that you said in the program Climate, the future is now. Certainly you said that in a global sense, that the future is not determined yet.
Of course it's not determined.
And this is exactly what concerns specific situations, that he and now a person with his...
In specific situations, of course. In specific situations, the future is determined, but only if you live to Satan's dictation. If you are free from this, your future is not predetermined, and it depends on you what it will be like. But even if the system has written several versions of your future, you can change everything, simply with your choice, with the choice to serve the spiritual world, or simply with an aspiration for spiritual freedom. You see, this already changes everything.
Also, Igor Mikhailovich, how not to lose this inner state? There is such a question while communicating with other people, with each other.
What's the difference? Who to communicate with? First of all, what is communication with people? If a person is developing spiritually, he begins to feel with whom he is communicating. If it's with a demon, hence with a demon. But if, pardon me, it's with a brother or a sister, this is absolutely wonderful. How can you lose this if spiritual communication is going along with the verbal one? Is this bad? But if you talk to a demon, well, with a demon, you keep your demon under control and just talk, but you don't lose the spiritual world. What is more important? After all, you do breathe when you talk. Yet, try not to breathe. You wouldn't be able to talk to anyone and not breathe while talking. Why? Because it's a need, so you should have the same need for being in God's love.
This permanent breath of the sun.
Absolutely right. You mustn't weaken it. It must intensify. That's where attention should be directed, and not to the verbal communication. Yes, such situations happen. A person has come, they seize his attention, distract him, entice him with something good, or revile him with something bad. What's the difference? It doesn't matter if it's good or bad. There's an attention limit, which may be allocated, while everything good must be there. Whereas here,
So it turns out that even if this communication between two people is dedicated to subject not related to spiritual development, for instance, regarding business,
there is no
the
difference.
person still can leave at that moment.
It's not that he can, he must live.
Right.
Because any business is mortal. And whatever we talk about here, about the temporary, all this is empty. It will vanish. It has a value for a certain period of time. Well, and again, it's a value for those who are interested in this, right? Let's take two businessmen. For them, it's interesting. A teacher and a student, there is such a point for them. One is interested in learning, while the other one is like, I wish this dunce would leave as soon as possible. Meaning, well, these are, again, momentary things that vanish very fast. While we are talking about eternity, we are talking about life. We are talking about God's love. What is more important? After all, what a person gains is everlasting, whereas our entire universe is temporary. It's an instant compared to that. So, what should we pay more attention to? To vanity? Yes, we are in this world, and we must live here. And we must do the job, we must communicate, and so on. Well, so communicate to the appropriate extent, but not more. This doesn't mean to have less contact. This means to pay less attention, to control the most precious resource of yours. Well, that is totally immutable. That's how it should be.
People ask a question, how does the spiritual world interact with us?
Well, it's a good question. What does it mean the spiritual world is interacting with us? If a person, let's say, doesn't knock, if he doesn't cultivate love in himself and doesn't direct it to the spiritual world won't direct it to him either. No way. Yet, does the spiritual world take care of people here? It surely does. However, it's not a demon. A demon is aggressive. He attacks and deprives. Just note the difference. After all, demonic forces always deprive, while the spiritual world always gives.
The bestower.
Again, demonic forces come and attack because it's an active consciousness, whereas the spiritual world is always there. However, if you push away the hand that is stretched out to you, it is stretched out, but it doesn't grab you. While you are pushing it away, of course you won't perceive the spiritual world. And how does it help? If a person is striving and really sending his love, it is returned 100-fold. And we have mentioned that there are even people who stay here and don't leave. Why? Because they serve the spiritual world. Regarding those very heavenly birds, right? After all, this is help. And what a tremendous help it is. And what is the essence of all people? To weaken Satan, to weaken him to such an extent that he would hold other little angels hostage less. Isn't this sacred? Isn't this what people are here for? In order to become free and to help others become free. in order to make this world not like the world of Satan as it is now, but like the angelic world, the spiritual world, so that everyone would love one another and would live in peace. And how can it be otherwise? Otherwise is when everything is temporary and finite. Otherwise means torments and suffering. Isn't that so? We live in lies. We lie to each other. We deceive each other. We envy, and we strive to be envied. We amuse ourselves with dead things, forgetting about the alive. But is this actually right? In my opinion, something has to be changed. First of all, in ourselves and in the world as a whole. However, changes in the world begin with changes in each of us.
I recalled how you told about the phenomenon of the Allat movement.
It was exactly about the fact that while in the material world demons unite with demons, Allatra is an example of how a spirit unites with a spirit while meaning a spirit into spirit.
That's how it should be. Death and life are actually different things.
In the Allat book, it is said that a warrior guards his deepest feelings from the sins of the visible world. Could you please explain what it means, guards the deepest feelings from the sins?
But we've been talking about this, basically, throughout the program. The deepest feelings can only go from an angel to the spiritual world. And naturally, the angel guards them from the sinful world, from Satan, because these are two streams that don't mix, and they flow in different directions. After all, the deepest true pure feelings, the feelings of love, are directed exactly towards the spiritual world. This is the attention which we give in order to receive something greater, to receive life, whereas this world can gobble up all of our attention, and it actually gobbles us up. If we switch our attention from true life to an illusion, we will lose life. That's why the warrior guards the true feelings. Everything is simple. He guards them from whom? From Satan. Everything is very simple.